Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rabbi Mendy of Tzfat, and sometimes I'm getting called Rabbi Menachem of Tzfat, so I don't know exactly which way it's going to go. And I'm here to give a second class presentation on marriage. And this time, this one's called long-term marriage. We spoke last week about various pasukim from the Torah and how they related to marriage in a way that gave us an idea having to do with what's exactly involved when we do get married. I want to continue that for a second right now with one particular thing, and afterwards I'm going to go into what the other presentations for a while are going to be like. So I want to talk about the one we stated last week. It comes from in Bereshis, where it says, man will leave his parents and cling to his wife, and they will become one flesh. So Rashi talks about that. And it's broken down into three different pieces. Man will leave his parents is a matter that it says it's like forsaking the ways of his parents. Not that he has a problem with his parents, but he's going to go and do it alone. On his own, he's going to make his life. He's going to be part of whatever efforts he comes up with, and he's going to make his life work. That's the beginning. And the second one is he will cling to his wife. That's a big question. What exactly does it mean? Rashi says, having to do with that, and he takes his information from Bereshis Rabbah, that we're talking about a person should not get involved in various kinds of wrong relationships. Because as he says, there's many relationships, many possible relationships. We should be very careful what we're going to call marriage. And the third, having to do with, and they become one flesh, has to do with having children. A child is the product of one flesh. So we have that in mind, but I want to go into the situation we're talking about that a husband he'll cling to his wife. And in that situation, when we're talking about it, as Rashi says it in the negative, don't do this. But let's talk about it in the positive, having to do with what it means to cling to your wife. First of all, you're going to have trust that the foundation of your relationship is based on trust. It also has to do with meeting expectations, and that what those expectations are become responsibilities. So if you take on a certain behavior between husband and wife, and then all of a sudden one says, okay, I'm not going to hold this up, I'm going to change this, I don't like that anymore. Unless it's decided between two people, it's a responsibility. And the next one is very important, we have to talk about, is a matter of love. What is it, love? Well, for Hashem, love is it's the way that things happen, and the language of Shamayim is love. Hashem loves everything and everyone. And for the Jewish people, he's very, very close to us. And when he gives us marriage, if we say it's not based on love, then what's it based on? So we have to I wanted to bring that up as a relationship to what happened in the words that we had last week. Now, talking about moving forward, so this presentation is called Long-Term Marriage. And the next one coming up is my favorite. My favorite thing to talk about. It has to do with the other side, not any difficulties in marriage, but how do you perform together as a couple in such a way that you're creating, that you're making a beautiful marriage happen, that you take whatever it is that you have in life and you just turn it around to the most beautiful things that can happen. I love that subject, and I call it endearment. After that comes gender differences. I think it's important for us to be able to look at, within a couple, the gender differences between a man and a woman, because a lot of times what we have is we just don't get it. And this is confusion. And confusion winds up in problems that can't even get solved. And you say, I just don't get it. So that's important to talk about, and we'll get some relief from that. Then I have what I call 81 questions. And these are questions on what is involved in your relationship. Now, it can be that you ask these questions to each other in order to be able to get answers. Why do I think the way I do? And why do I expect what I do? And how can I expect that of you unless I already spoke about it with you? 81 different questions gives us tremendous insight. But we have to always remember, when you're dealing with a couple, you have to be sensitive to the other. And therefore, these questions are only ripe and good if the situation is that both people accept to talk about them. But if it turns out that why are you asking me these questions? What do you want from me? If that's what happens, then you stop. Okay, it's all right. If you're talking about a couple who's not married yet, and you have questions that you put out there in order to be able to understand that person before you get married, it's a wonderful thing. But then again, go only as far as you can before you say, that doesn't work. I'm only bothering the person, and I can bother my relationship. After that, that could take more time than 1 week in order to talk about those questions. I'm not going to bring them all up. And then the next is, how do you plan your marriage together? So that instead of just having it go according to, well, we got married, now we're okay. No, you're not okay. There's a lot of things to plan if you want to have a long-term marriage that really, really works. And then, what can you do if you get married, you have children, and they start to tear you apart? So we need some questions, we need some answers to these situations, because they do come up, and it's very important for us to know what to do about it. Now, we get married because marriage is a lot of fun. Because when we get married, and it's a lot of fun, we're just going to have a fun, everything's going to go well, and we're going to enjoy it. We're going to enjoy our partner, and we're going to enjoy what comes up, and that's why we get married, because everything works that way. Right? No. Marriage is very special, but it's not easy. Now we take a look at the Mishkan. We talked about it a little bit last week, that the Mishkan was built, and there were certain things that had to be very precise. It was very creative. It was a matter of putting things in the right place. You had to dye things. You had to make things. Everything had to be done in a certain way. And if it wasn't precise, you had a problem. So we had to take a look and say, does that apply to marriage? Does marriage have to be so precise? Should marriage be a matter of so creative? Is it a matter of, I have expectation, that I have it just this way? Well, some people look at me and say, what? How are you putting marriage together like that? I never heard of a marriage like that. You get married, and then you play it by ear. Play it by ear? Would you open up your business, open the doors, invite people in, and once they're in, you say, now I have to decide what I'm going to do? Of course not. If you opened your business and you didn't have any right understanding of what you're going to do, you're going to close your business immediately and nobody's coming back. So the same thing here having to do with marriage. If you're going to get married, you better have an idea, because marriage is the most complex of all relationships. It can be the most beautiful, but you have to make it be that way. It's a highly emotional situation that you get yourself into, but also it's the biggest project of your life. So you do whatever it takes. Having to do with love. Is it important? Are there other things that you can do to keep your coupleship together? What does society tell us? Society tells us that when you find your partner and you get ready to get married, and then you get married, what is that thing that happens to you that you feel so good about? It's infatuation. It's not love. And infatuation lasts for a certain amount of time, but then it's gone. So as given an example is a matter of how a match works. At the top of the match is a matter of some sulfur, and then the rest of it is a stick. So what you do is you light the sulfur, and it comes way up in a flame, and then it comes all the way down, and then the actual wood of the match is burning. So we say, well, what's infatuation? It's the sulfur part. And the sulfur comes up, and you're very, very happy with this, and you call it love, but it's not love at all, it's infatuation. And after that, the wood's burning, which means you come into the situation of love, which is much less strong, and you don't know how to deal with that, because actually you were expecting that thing that you thought was infatuation is love, and therefore you were never expecting it to get smaller like it does. So some of our Jewish professionals also hold by that. But I can tell you, don't. It's not true. You can get married out of love, and you can keep your love alive. But you have to know what you're doing, and you have to want it bad enough. Having to do with, and the reason I can say that is because that was my experience during my life. We have a situation which is people get married with a shidduch. Sometimes what they do is they meet somebody, and then they're together a few times, and then they decide, okay, looks good, we get married. Do they love each other? From what I've been told by people that did that, no. There's not enough time to get to love the other person. You made a decision based on what looked to be a good decision. But you come into your marriage without love. Is it going to grow? Maybe. Maybe not. I asked somebody one time, okay, so you got married, you didn't love each other at the time, but now you've been married for a few years. Is it turned into love? And I didn't get an answer, which basically told me it didn't turn out to be love the way maybe I wanted it to be. But I'm able to work with that. For me, love was very important from the beginning, because that's how I am. Why? You see, people have not only intelligence, that we say intellectual intelligence, but some people look at a scale and they check out emotional intelligence, which is how you're able to feel things. And for me, I have a strong emotional intelligence. So having to do with love is very important to me. I like to give love, and I love to get love. And it's part of my life. It needs to be like that. So I had to have love in my life when I got married. I had to see that I was going to find a person that was wonderful that I could marry, and then together we can create a situation of love that continues throughout all the years. But I really had some questions on that. Is that really possible? People will tell you, no. You run out of gas at a certain point. And so I had 3 issues that I had at the beginning. And these were very strong for me. And I already found that I was going to be married, but these 3 came up. The first is I grew up in a family where my parents were divorced. They were divorced, they were separated by the time I was 5.5 years old. And they were divorced by the time I was 7. And it was a horrible, horrible thing to go through. And I said, I'm not going to put my kids through that. My kids have to know that they have a marriage that works. So the D word, divorce, that wasn't going to happen for me. My plan was get married once and stay married and do everything that you have to do in order to remain married. But now I had another question. This was the second part. What happens if, in spite of the fact that you want to be in love and you want to get love and you want your marriage to work in such a way, what if the love dies out anyway? I had no way to be able to know, according to the people in my life, if love could last a lifetime. Nobody told me that. And what I saw having to do with my earlier relationships, that I had early relationships, but they didn't last in love. So how do I know that when I get married, I'll be able to continue to have love? And what if it peters out and all of a sudden what's left is something else? How am I going to stay married? Because maybe I need love. I didn't have an answer. And the third one was the worst of all. What if I marry my wife-to-be, Leah Luna, and she's a happy girl, and due to the things that I do in our marriage, I make her sad? I couldn't live with myself. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if that's what I brought to her over her lifetime. She says, okay, I marry you. It's my responsibility to make sure that she's happy. Well, that's how I began. Now, as a child, I was interested in girls immediately. My mother told me that when she rolled me around in my stroller, if she stopped and talked with a pretty girl, an adult, I was already giggling and looking and putting on a show, and that's how it was when I was a tiny tot. But then I got a little bit older, and it got stronger by the time before I was in kindergarten already. I loved a certain girl, and by the time I was in kindergarten, there was another one. By the time I was in first grade, I joined a fan club of one girl, and I just kept looking for her all the time to be able to enjoy just looking at her. In first grade, I wasn't like the other kids. The other boys, they didn't look at girls for anything. They were out playing with their balls, and me too. I was out there joining them every single day at recess. But I also had a night that was going like this. It was very important to me because I had a high level of emotionality, and that meant I had a lot of care, and it was going to go somewhere. Well, it continued to be like that as I went through elementary school and into junior high school. And at a certain point, I was still very young, I was already thinking, well, what's going to happen? Am I going to get married? I didn't know. Does it come my way? Or maybe not. But if it comes my way, I'm going to be very happy if I get married. I was a little boy, but I'm thinking this way, and I'm saying, what is the name of the girl that I would marry? I'm already questioning names. As a small child, my youth, I'm looking for that kind of information. Well, of course, I got married. And at the beginning I thought, this is it. There's never going to be a problem. I got married. This is the happiest thing I could do. And for the rest of my life, I'm going to be happy and joyful. And we're going to have a wonderful time together. And I had an aunt that told me the same thing. Now that you got married, you're going to be happy ever after. Ah, yes, I know that. I know that. But in my first year of marriage, Leah and I had a spat once a week. Not on purpose, of course. But the way it worked out, I could see that it wasn't perfect. But we were so much in love and we were so romantic. We held hands everywhere we went. We kissed, we hugged. We were wherever we were together in madly in love. But these things did come up. Well, we were married for 5 years. And we had so much trouble. One of the things that we had that was so hard was joblessness. I couldn't find a job. Once we got married, it became very difficult, so we didn't have money. And it got worse. We had some savings, but the savings went out, and then we didn't even have food. And we were trying to get by going to the market and spending a little pocket change in order to get some food for a few days. And we had it so hard, and finally we had to move from where we were and move to another city. And eventually, a few months later, Leah had her job and I had mine, and we were able to move forth. But the problems that happen take a toll. So we were married for 5 years, and we were still loving each other, and we were still romantic and holding each other. And it was just like it was at the beginning, but it didn't quite feel the same. And we were trying to make things work, but we didn't have the time together anymore like we did at the beginning. So I started wondering, well, we're married for 5 years. 5 years ago, we stood in line, marriage license bureau, in order to get our marriage license to get married. And there were a lot of people in that line. I looked at them, and I wondered, how many of them have had marriage trouble? How many of them are still together? Now, I hoped that everybody was together, but I wasn't sure because I knew how difficult times come. So we continued to go ahead in our marriage over the years. We had children. We had 3 children. And they were growing up, and we were together. And having children, of course, is going to be another difficulty that you're going to go through. So we didn't have the problems so much anymore of money, but now we have the problems of raising children. And children, they test you, and they want to know what they can do in order to see, will you hold together if I do this to you? And we went through that too. And we were still together, and we were still romantic. And none of that changed because we insisted that the way we want our marriage, because we made plans, is to be like that. So we didn't let any of those things get in the way. Well, we decided to start going on dates to bookstores. And when we went, Leah would go look for her books, and I would go to the self-help section or the marriage section and get books on marriage. And we'd sit there for hours, and I could read maybe a book or two. Then I get another book to take with me. So I would buy that book. And from the last week from the book that I had, I would return it so I never had to pay money for my books. And I read all that I could. In order not to know the problems in marriage, I wanted to know what works, why my marriage is staying even with all the difficulties that we went through. How come? There's got to be reasons, and it must be written down. So one day we were in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and we went to a bookstore, and I picked out a book, and I brought it to Leah, and I said, look, see, I got a book. See this book? I showed her, see? Look at this book. And she laughed. I said, why are you laughing? She said, that's not a book. Sure looks like a book to me. It's not a book? No, it's not a book. It's not a real book. Well, then what is it? It says it's a self-help book. If you want to know about marriage, then you have to go to school and take classes on marriage. And then you'll know about it, and they'll give you real books to read. What? Well, I was a computer programmer. So I had never thought about going to college to change anything. But now, 2 weeks later, I was enrolled in social work school, going towards an MSW, and I was getting real books. I was reading them, and I was doing all my work, and I looked forward to everything that I was accomplishing. And after 2 years, a little more, I graduated, and I got a job working in a clinic and seeing people on all sorts of things having to do with mental health. But one of them that was involved was marriage. And Leah and I, because she was also a social worker, we worked together with couples. And we had a couple in front of us, and we sat behind them, and then we talked over their problems, and we said, marriage is that way. So it became a very fine thing to do. And we loved it a lot. Well, we continued to go on with our marriage over the years. And there were more problems, more things to resolve. But in spite of that, we were seeing people, and the question is, are we okay to help people, even though they have problems and we have problems? The situation is our problems were generally much smaller because we didn't do certain things that could be done to destroy a marriage. For instance, over the period of more than 42 years of being married, I got upset and raised my voice 4 times. Now, I regret those times. They happened because my wife didn't raise her voice. But the way we looked at it is we were going to be as careful as we could with each other. And we were. If we had an issue that became an argument, the way we handled it is by sticking on the argument. And that meant that we didn't call each other names. We didn't say, well, you know, you are this, and it's because of this that you got to be that way, and you are just a mess. That becomes very personal, and that's called contempt. And if you do that, people in the marriage industry of statistics will tell you exactly how much more time you have of being married. You have to be very careful the way you speak with each other. We didn't get there. We had particular things in mind that would help us along. For instance, if we got into a situation where it became very difficult, we couldn't deal with the situation, and it was starting to escalate into an argument, I chose to do something called disengagement, which is, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to fight. There is no fight going on because I'm not going to get involved. Okay, so then maybe another zinger, and after that, I'm not getting involved. There is no fight. Show a smile, and we walked away. Do that about 7 times in a row, and you'll see that there's no more reason to argue. Arguments are finished. And that's how we did until we went along. In 2011, we had the hardest time of our lives. It was the situations that came up were so difficult to deal with, and it brought us to the point, the closest point that we came to divorce. So what do? We work real hard We said, we're not going to give into this, and we worked real hard to overcome what we were doing. And one of the things we did, and I'll talk about it more next time, is on our anniversaries to take our problems and put them down, and then to look through them, and year by year on our anniversaries, resolve them. After 35 years, we had resolved all our issues. So therefore, we don't have any more issues. So in that case, you don't have any more arguments. We haven't argued for over 8 years. Because once you've resolved your issues, well, science will tell you, and marriage science will tell you that you cannot resolve your issues. They'll always be there. Wrong. It's up to you. You want to resolve them, so resolve them. So I let you now know how we did it. Now we have something we say, okay, we have a disagreement. So it's easy to say, let it be your way. What difference does it matter on little problems of this or that? Let it be your way. And the other person said, I don't know, maybe you should go your way. And that's how you resolve things very easily. We never lost our romance. And we never lost our love. It was there from the beginning, and it continued to be that way. Things to know in marriage, I'm finishing now, is these are the things you have to do if you want to make things be good. Vulnerability. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Don't protect yourself when it comes to a matter of discussing a matter. Forgiveness. Forgive. It's hard to forgive sometimes. You know how long it might take to forgive something is hard? It could take 20 years. But you're working at it, and eventually you'll get there. Come to agreements. Don't live life in a way of, I don't like that, so I'm not going to agree with you. Come to your agreements. Disengagement, very important one, as we already talked about. And most important of all, this is the hardest one, patience. You say, okay, patience. Well, I have patience. No, we're not talking about that kind of patience. A person comes into a marriage, and the person that you're marrying, you have a responsibility on that. You don't walk away from it. But you chose that person. Hashem put them before you. And they're carrying baggage. They were hurt in childhood. They have a difficulty. It could be anger, resentment. They don't want to be criticized. Jealousy. Whatever it is, they're holding on to that, and it's real, real strong. And they take it out on you over and over and over again. And you keep getting hurt. Well, how much can you take? What if I say, you're married for 10 years and your self-esteem is getting lower and everything is hard and everything's difficult, and the person keeps coming at you because they're going through this until it's resolved. What if I tell you it takes 20 years to resolve it? You're going to have to deal with that. Can you deal with it? Can you take it? Can you be able to be there and show love even though you're getting pounced on? It's up to you. If you do it, until the point is that the person that your marriage partner resolves their issue, they eventually will. Then Hashem looks at you and he said, that's what you did. I have some rewards for you. Take one of these and one of those and that one. No. Take the whole box. But because he's so proud of people that took him seriously, that he gave you the best present he could do. He gave you the partner of your life. Thank you. Yeah.